Greetings and a warm welcome to the Manifested e-learning platform. Today we continue with the subject taxation. We are going to study the taxation of business income. In this lesson, we will only focus on definition of terms. We are going to define 5 terms. 1 is trade, number 2, profession, number 3, vocation, number 4, adventure and concern. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to define the 5 terms. The lesson is on taxation of business income. And in Kenya candidates, just like many jurisdictions, the taxation of business income is governed by the Income Tax Act, which is an act of parliament that defines business broadly to encompass various activities that generate income. So the act defines business to encompass various activities that generate income. And understanding these definitions is crucial for determining how income is assessed and taxed. So the Income Tax Act, Chapter 470, provides specific definition for the term business, which includes any trade, profession, or vocation, and every manufacture, adventure, and concern in the nature of trade, but does not include employment. So business, as defined by the Act, does not include employment. In our previous subtopic, we discussed the taxation of employment income. So in this lesson, as I said earlier, we're going to define the 5 terms, beginning with the term trade. What is the meaning of the term trade in the context of taxation of business income? Now, trade refers to activities involving the systematic buying and selling of goods or services with the intention of making profit. If one engages in activities of buying and selling goods or services with the intention of making profit, then that's the meaning of trade. That means the person is engaging in trade. It implies regularity, continuity, or an organized approach of making profit or engaging in commercial activities. That's the meaning of trade. And examples of trade would include retail operations. Okay? Example would include retail. Another example of a trading activity, it could be manufacturing. You understand, candidates? So first of all, just understand trade is buying and selling of goods or services for the purposes of making profit. That's the meaning of trade. So you have retail operations, like running a supermarket continuously. Okay? A supermarket that continuously buys and sells goods to the public, that is an example of trade. We may have wholesale distribution. Wholesale distribution is yet another example of trade. That means a distributor regularly, for example, importing electronics and selling them to the retailers. That is an example of a trading activity. So that's the meaning of trade. Trade means buying or selling products or goods to the public with a view of making profit. So trade means you do it continuously engaging in the process of buying and selling of goods. And an example is retail trade or wholesale trade. So that's the first definition. The second definition is the definition of the term profession. Profession. What is a profession? Now, a profession involves activities that are specialized. Okay? Involves activities where we have specialized intellectual or technical skills, knowledge, and qualifications that are primary, whose primary means is generating income. When you engage in activities where knowledge is required, intellect is required, technical skills are required, then that's the meaning of a profession. You understand? A profession, in other words, involves activities where specialized intellectual or technical skills, knowledge, and qualifications are the primary means of generating income. And income from profession is typically derived from providing services rather than selling tangible goods. So professional services are intangible. Okay? And examples could be legal services, medical services, legal services. These are intangible. There are many of them. Accounting, auditing, counseling, accounting and auditing services, counseling services. You understand? For one to offer legal services, medical services, accounting services, one has to have skills, technical skills. One must have intellectual skills. One must have qualifications. To qualify as an accountant, you have to gain certain qualifications. For example, you must be a certified public accountant and so on. So, professional services are intangible services, medical services, and so on. Legal services, here we are talking of, for example, a legal firm providing legal advice and representation to clients. Medical services, could be an example could be a doctor operating a private clinic or providing healthcare services. We have accounting and auditing services, where you may have a certified public accountant offering auditing, or offering tax or consultancy or financial advisory services, and so on. So that's the meaning of a profession. Then the third term we need to define is vocation. Vocation. What is a vocation? Now, a vocation is similar to a profession in that it involves a specific skill or calling pursued as a means of livelihood. And while it may not require formal professional qualifications, it involves expertise and is generally undertaken for income. Examples could be art and design. Someone who is involved in, say, artwork, developing artwork. Okay, for example, a graphic designer or a painter earning income from selling artwork or offering design services. That is a vocation. Example of a vocation. We may have skilled craftsman. A skilled craftsman is also another example. For example, we may have a carpenter or a tailor running a business based on specialized manual skills. A tailor, a carpenter. These are examples of vocation. You understand? Yes. So currently we are studying taxation of business income. In this lesson, we are just defining terms that are included in the definition of business income. You recall candidates began by noting that the Income Tax Act provides specific definitions of the term business. Within that term business, we have, in the definition of business as per the Income Tax Act, the first term is trade, we have profession, vocation. We are moving to the third term, which is adventure. Number 4, adventure. What is an adventure? Adventure. Now, adventure in the context of the Kenyan tax law refers to an adventure in the nature of trade. Adventure in the context of Kenya tax law, often referred to as an adventure in the nature of trade, is also a crucial concept because it allows the Kenya Revenue Authority to tax isolated transactions or single ventures that, despite lacking the typical regularity of trade, because a trade, we said, one feature is regularity, continuously buying and selling of goods and services. That is a trade. But we may have an adventure which could be just a one-off transaction. Do you understand? One may just engage in a one-off transaction with the purpose of making profit. It lacks, adventure lacks the typical regularity of trade, carried out with a profit-making intention. It may exhibit the characteristics of a commercial undertaking. And how do you determine an adventure candidate? What are the key considerations in determining an adventure in the nature of trade? One feature is profit motive. The primary intention behind transactions is to make profit. The next feature is just the nature of the asset. The type of asset involved, for example, property or goods, and whether it was purchased specifically for resale. When you buy something one-off for the purposes of reselling it, then that is how you determine an adventure. Then there is also the method of sale. How do you determine an adventure? It is through the method of sale. That is the use of commercial methods to market and also sell the asset. For example, one may be engaged in, you may think of, say, a teacher who buys a piece of land. Okay. A teacher's such a person, his profession is teaching, but he may engage in a commercial activity like buying property. When one buys property for the purposes of reselling it as a one-off, then that is described as an adventure. You understand, candidates? That may be defined as an adventure because it meets the characteristics that we have laid out. When one buys such a property, the purpose there you can see is to make profit. Okay? And the teacher may buy that land for the purposes of reselling. Then thirdly, the teacher may market and also sell the asset. So one such example of an adventure is just speculative land sale. I've given that example. Speculative land sale. An individual who is not a real estate dealer purchases a plot of land, then quickly subdivides it and sells the plots at a significant profit. Okay? Having engaged in commercial activities like advertising and also infrastructure development for the sole purpose of resale. That is an adventure. Then we have isolated commodity trading. Isolated commodity. Commodity. Isolated commodity trading. What do I mean? How is isolated commodity trading an adventure? Now, for example, a person may buy a large quantity of a specific commodity during a shortage and then sells it rapidly at a higher profit or a higher price, even if they don't regularly trade in that commodity. So an individual may identify demand or shortage of the commodity, then buys it from elsewhere and meets that demand as a one-off thing. So that is an adventure candidate. So these are two examples of adventure. Adventure. You understand? Yes. Now let's move to the last term which we need to define. The last term is concern. Concern. What is a concern? Now the term concern is used in the Income Tax Act to broaden the definition of business, and also it encompasses a wide range of commercial activities and enterprises. And a concern in the nature of trade implies an organized entity or activity carried out for commercial gain. Examples include startups and enterprises. A startup or an enterprise is a concern. Any newly established company or business venture engaged in commercial activities, that is an example of a concern. Digital business, yet another example. Digital business. These are companies operating in the digital economy, such as those involved in e-commerce, software development, and also digital content creation, that are generally considered a concern under the broad definition of business. Associations and clubs, number 3. Associations and clubs with commercial activities. We may have club, because we know clubs, candidates, they don't exist for the purposes of making it. But we may have associations or clubs that have other businesses that, for example, a club may have a bar whose purpose is to buy and sell products to the members and so on. So while primarily non-profit, if these activities or entities engage in activities that generate income with a profit motive, for example, running a bar or hosting commercial events, then these activities are treated as concern in the nature of trade. So, candidates, that's the end of our today's lesson, where we've defined 5 terms under the taxation of business income. And the income tax, candidates, as we stated earlier, defines business broadly to encompass various activities that generate income. And these activities include trade, profession, vocation, adventure, and concern. These 5 activities are part of the definition of the term business in the context of Income Tax Act. In this lesson, we defined the 5 terms, beginning with the trade. We said that trade is a process of buying and selling goods or services with the intention of making profit. All right? Trade implies regularity, continuously buying goods and services year in, year out. And that's where we have the distinction between trade and adventure. adventure lacks regularity. Here one just has a one-off transaction, like speculative land sale. So that's why we have the definition, the distinction between these two. But they are activities that are common in nature. The main intention of engaging in adventures or trade is to make profit, which has to be taxed according to the Kenya tax laws. We've given examples of trade. One is retail trade and wholesale trade. The second term is profession. We find profession as activities where specialized intellectual or technical skills are the primary means of generating income. And the income from a profession is typically derived from providing services rather than selling tangible goods. We've given examples of profession. One is legal services, medical services, accounting and auditing services, counseling services, and so on. The third term we've defined in this lesson is vocation. Vocation. What is a vocation? Now, a vocation is similar to a profession in that it involves a specific skill or calling pursued as a means of livelihood. And while it may not require formal professional qualifications like a profession, okay, it may not require such level of professional qualifications, but it involves expertise and is generally undertaken for income. Examples would be art, work, and design, a graphic designer or one who paints, a painter. That's part of vocation. You have skilled craftsmen like carpenters, masons, plumbers, and so on. They require skills, just like what is required in profession, but there may not be specific qualifications that are required for one to engage in vocation. Then, of course, you have adventure, which you have defined. You've defined adventure and given examples like speculative land sale, isolated commodity selling or trading. Then lastly, we've defined a concern just as a startup or an enterprise. It could be digital business or associations and clubs with commercial activities. We know clubs and associations, the primary objective is not to make profit, but they could have other activities that make profit, like running a bar and hosting commercial events, running hotels and restaurants, and so on. So that's the end of today's lesson on taxation of business income, in which we've only defined 5 terms as per the income tax, where we've defined trade or business as trade, profession, or vocation, or adventure, or concern in the nature of trade, but does not include employment. So business, as far as the income tax is concerned, does not include employment income. So thank you for attending this lesson. Bye-bye.